started my own independent company. Then I produced a film called Where the Red Fern Grows that Disney released. The guy funds my project, decides he's going to screw me. Okay. All my savings I spent literally in a legal battle.
You were broke at 35.
Yeah.
Today you have something just shy of 20,000 apartment units and have sold $2 billion in transactions.
Yeah.
For a 25-year-old starting in real estate, what do you suggest they do? Wow. What did it take for you to get to the place where that transition happened?
Depression.
But you had money at that point.
The money kept rolling in. I was highly functional, but completely in a psychological hole.
Do you think that you could have gotten to the point of transition had you not become financially successful? Today I've got a great friend of mine, JP Newman, who has done over close to $2 billion in real estate transactions, almost 20,000 apartment units, and lives with the notion of conscious capitalism being at the center. I don't know about you, but I have a very hard time learning theory from somebody that I know has not executed.
It'd be like having a 450 pound coach teaching you about fitness.
Yep.
So last week, as I wrote a big check last week for my kids' school. It's one of the most expensive schools, it turns out, University of Miami. Although I have to say it's very, it's cool looking. They have their own beach. I mean, that's something, right? But I'm sitting there and they're talking about what they're going to teach my kid as a business major. And they said, by the first year, your kid's going to have a resume and he'll have his own LinkedIn page. And I'm like, holy shit. That's
the objective?
I just wrote you a huge check. And my kid is going to have a LinkedIn page. My kid's already flipped a house. Like,
right.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
But they're doing their best. It is really, it feels like you're just doing it because you're in America, and thank God maybe if you're in a position to do it. But if it came down, is this really necessary? Hard to convince me that this current system creates the necessary skills.
I don't know many people that are convinced of that these days.
No.
Certainly not that generation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. They're gearing you towards being able to get your first job. So you're going to spend 4 more years in college so that some big firm is going to wisp you away and give you your first job at the average price, the average income. They were bragging is $77,000 would be your first job out of college. And you and I both know, first of all, like the days of a company's going to, an IBM or a Deloitte's going to come and take you and you're going to work there for 25 years and you're going to sit at a cubicle and work your way up. Like, first of all, who's interested in that story? And the answer is maybe somebody. I don't know.
Dude, average tenure these days is something like 2 to 4 years.
I was going to say, so you're going to prepare for 4 years so that you can get some crap ass job from some big firm. Does it really matter versus everything else that's out there right now in the world?
Yeah. Also, whatever that is, $6,400 a month.
Right.
And you're talking about living in a space now where the gig economy, it's not that difficult to get 10 grand a month quickly.
If he actually had to pay for college or go and get scholarships or get loans, get student loans, the cost of this education to pay it back, you do the math on that $77,000, how many years it would take to pay that back? It would take you 6-7 years just to pay college back. When my kid was 13 or 14, I guess, when COVID hit, we found a mask that had metal in it from Israel. It was like this metal mask that would actually kill the germs.
Whoa.
And my son became a wholesaler. He called him, became a wholesaler, and he made like $5,000 in selling these masks. And everybody wanted one. Like, he didn't have to try that hard.
Right.
And I saw like the self-confidence and he had to manage the inventory, manage the money. And it wasn't a crazy hard business. But I literally said, like, he was at home, had nothing to do. And I could tell he was going crazy. And I just kind of threw because I saw this mask in a magazine. And I'm like, I'm going to buy one. That's great. I want to, I don't want to sit there if it's got copper in or whatever. And they say it's hospital grade. And he did the research. And then everything kind of like let him, I helped him. I gave him some container, but he just did it. But that self-confidence, and I had a similar experience growing up where I actually was selling calculators. Like, calculators I was buying from $3 and I was selling them for $10. I was 7 years old, going door to door with a briefcase as a kid.
Damn.
And I made my first thing, I made $500. That confidence of making $500, I know it doesn't sound like a lot of money, but it was a game changer for me. I kept trying other things because it gave me the confidence to explore and try other things.
I don't know where it came from for me, but when I was very, very young, when I was like 6, my parents retell this story all the time, but I was I think I was younger than that.
Yeah.
I was downtown Ann Arbor with my older sister.
Yeah.
And they were like, hey, we're going to run to the store. We'll be right back. I was standing there with my sister and I was like, we should go to McDonald's. And she was like, we can't. We don't have our parents. And I was like, I have money. I don't need parents.
Yeah. Isn't that great?
Yeah. But it was the realization
Wow.
of this is the lever. Then it was just how do you get money? How do you make money?
Yeah. This is back to the rich dad, poor dad thing. I think that my dad set me up enough and then let me figure it out. Giving me that experience where I had some success, I think was a game changer for my trajectory of willing to try other things, willing to fail, willing to succeed. It followed a bunch of other things. And now to this day, I joke and say in my life, the day that I make money and I'm having fun on the same day, like if I'm on the ski slopes and I get a call that a certain check hit, and it started at a very young age, now I call it my Ferris Bueller day. So my Ferris Bueller day is I'm having the best day of my life and money came in. Lots of conversations before he went off to Miami. The last thing he asked me to do was a liquor run for him, which I thought was pretty funny.
Like, Garrett? Or your son?
My son. You're in that moment of your goodbye. He's like, hey, Dad, before you go, I could use some Heineken.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Okay, so I want to get back to how we got to this. I want to get to how we got to this moment.
Yeah.
But let's start with how you got to now. You mentioned the impression of entrepreneurship from your father.
Yeah.
But I also know little bits of your story. One is that you were broke at 35.
Yeah.
Two is that today.
About 33. Started making money. Yeah. About 33.
Today you have something just shy of 20,000 apartment units.
Yes.
And have sold close to $2 billion in real estate, or had $2 billion in transactions.
Yeah.
How did you start in entrepreneurship, and what was the initial journey like?
Literally, I feel like every lesson from the one I just shared with you, like being a young kid with a briefcase, has kind of led to a really entrepreneurial streak in me. I thought I was going to be pre-law. Like I thought I'd be like a nice Jewish lawyer until I realized I didn't want to go to law school. Like I was studying for my LSATs and I'm like, no. And it really led to a spin. I spent a lot of my 20s, and I think that's why I was such a late bloomer in life. I spent a lot of my 20s just trying to figure it out. And I joke and say, I think I had one of the worst stories at a party that you could have. I was broke and single and just really trying to figure it out for a long time. I actually was doing some real estate. I fixed and flipped a few homes, but I hadn't quite found my love yet. I wanted to find something that really, really appealed to me. I think passion is so important. And I think having the courage to have a bad story for a while, where you go to a party, like, what are you up to? And I'm figuring it out. I mean, I know it sounds painful and everybody wants to like have that kick-ass story. I think that pain and that humility also got me the courage to actually take a little more time to figure out what I love. It actually started out, I'd say my MBA was I worked for Sony Pictures. I was vice president of family entertainment. And I actually produced animation for like almost 9 years. I worked for toy companies. I produced animation. I was flying around the world. I was producing for Sony when DVDs were still a thing.
Damn.
I was doing DVDs, and I basically was the youngest vice president, in a large division. And they kind of said to me, we're Sony. We don't have a lot of like kids films like Disney. Can you help us create a family library? But the truth was, no one was super interested internally because they were making like the cool, like Miramax, like, it was called Screen Gems. They were making like the Miramax films. So they didn't really want to deal with the kid stuff. So they kind of like left me alone. And I was like 28 years old. And that was just awesome.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty good. Jim Henson, and we were doing all kinds of good stuff, Bear in the Big Blue House and Swan Princess. We did a lot of cool stuff back then. And I actually was in the first days of CGI. So I got to actually produce the first holiday special for CBS with CGI. So it was like right when the Toy Stories were coming out. I was producing things that they said it was impossible to do. I got a quote for $22 million from Sony to produce this 48-minute Christmas special for CBS. And I got it done for $3.5 million from a little shop in Toronto.
Did you get to keep the difference?
Yeah, no. Actually, it's funny. At Sony, and this is big corporate America, I actually was looked as a trader. Like it wasn't looked as a good thing that I saved my division $16 million. They saw me as a trader for not going with the Sony brand.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that was a pretty interesting experience. I had Carl's Jr. and Hardee's. Like it became this national promotion over my little story. It was called The Nuttiest Nutcracker, and it was 5 stories telling the stories of the Nutcracker with Jim Belushi and all these like really fun actors and stuff like that. And I was really proud of it that, we figured stuff out. There was a thing out called Veggie Tales. I don't remember Veggie Tales or not, but it was Veggie Tales was
That's wholesome.
the most wholesome thing, and I decided to put a little twist on it. So it was super fun. And, I think from there, I realized that working at Sony in the entertainment career, like I actually went independent. I produced a film called Where the Red Fern Grows that Disney released with Dave Matthews, and Alison Krauss did the music. And it was actually, here's the ironic part about that. I was independent at that point. I had left, started my own independent company. And that was a big deal to get Red Fern. Red Fern Grows is considered one of the 100 most important books in American culture.
I remember it very, very well.
Yeah.
I was forced to read it when I was a child.
Yeah, and, everyone's forced to read it. So I got to.
Yeah,
it was
part
actually
of the American canon.
And this was a remake. The original was made in '74, and we did the remake of it. And here's the ironic thing of how life throws you a curveball. So the guy I got to finance it for me was in real estate in Texas, and I knew nothing about real estate or Texas. And I'm just a Hollywood, LA kid. And so the guy funds my project. I get Disney to release it. I get Dave Matthews, Alison Krauss. It was a really great film. I'm really proud of it. So the guy in the end of the day decides he's going to screw me. Once he met Dave Matthews and Alison, and he's going to France, and he decides, even though our contract was rock solid, like I don't mess around with contracts. And I was about 31 at this point. I had left Sony. He goes, look, I'm super rich off of real estate. You're not. You're poor still. Like, I'm just going to screw you and toy with you. He goes, so look, I know your contract's good, but I'm not going to honor it. He's like, I'll give you like a third of what and I'm going to change your title. Even though you produced it, I'm going to give you a lesser title. I'm going to give myself a bigger title. And it was a really interesting, he was at that point living in LA, and he started a production company. Like, basically, he used me and launched me, and then, used that film to do some, he was a bad guy. And I got a lawyer, and by the time I paid my lawyers and they took it on contingency, it was much. I put 2.5 years of my life into that film, and I got paid much, much less. And I got paid so much less than by the time I paid my lawyers and settled. Yeah, and they were using the most expensive lawyers they could. They were just trying to out-lawyer me at that point. And I think my lawyers knew I was right, but even they were feeling the pain of like what they did. I think I had a realization at that point. I was just met the woman who was going to become my wife. You met my wife, Janet. And I kind of dreamed of financial freedom. And I just realized that like I couldn't be with intellectual property, like, films, which I love to produce.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
So, there are lots of things that I want to highlight there. Like, one is this reminder of it matters who you work with.
Oh, it does.
And, Gary Keller is known for saying that he refers to contracts as disagreements, not as agreements,
right?
Because they're only relevant when you disagree.
Yeah.
But that's also only true if you can enforce them. Your example is a beautiful reason of why it's so important to be careful with who you work with.
Yeah.
What are the other lessons that you got from that experience?
Well, it changed my entire career because I realized that intellectual property at the time, and still kind of the saying, is that you have so little control over your destiny. Because you need now you need Netflix, or you need an Amazon at the time, you needed a Sony, you needed a movie studio, so I was getting people to actually back me. I had like 10 really cool ideas when I had my own production company. But I realized that everyone was smiling and saying, JP, these are phenomenal. But then, I always joke and say, if the phone doesn't ring the next day from the business development person, it doesn't matter what they say to you, it wasn't happening. So the reason why I switched to real estate was I figured, how do I take intellectual property, the joy that I get from creating things, and how can I do that with real property? Because with real property, like real estate, I have a lot more control of my destiny. I don't need an MTV. I don't need a studio to say yes. So it took that away. It also put me into a tailspin for almost 2 years of depression. So it wasn't like an easy decision, because obviously going from the south of France and working with Reese Witherspoon on voicing things and like just doing really cool stuff to like, oh my God, now I'm doing dusty commercial real estate in Louisiana and Texas. Like, what happened to my life?
That's an interesting place to start for entrepreneurship, because from the beginning, you had other people funding things.
Yeah.
Whether it was Sony or you were raising money from a real estate guy.
Yeah. Always.
Yeah. How were you aware of the financial structure of funding the movie at that point in time? Like today, film credits are, a viable tax option.
Right.
Did you understand the underpinning of the business side of financing
I
films?
did, because remember, I was vice president of acquisition at Sony and production. So
Right.
I was the guy who would either license content or produce content. So if anything, I think of Sony as my MBA in really business. Like the MBA I got after being at Sony for 5 years. But it was nice having a team of lawyers behind you and business
Right.
development people, so you'd get things done. And you were the movie studio, so you were the 800-pound gorilla. So it pretty much would always go your way. Like it wasn't a difficult negotiation, but I certainly understood international film rights, TV rights. Like I'm well adept from that experience.
Wild. It also, one of the things that I don't think I ever could have done it, but one of the things that I frequently say when people ask me if I would have done something differently, it is working for somebody that knew what they were doing instead of just trying to do it all myself from the beginning.
For sure.
And that sounds like you got a lot of that there.
That really was my discipline. I was spinning for a long time. I mean, I have funny stories of parking cars in Hollywood for the movie stars. Like I was in boiler room sales in my 20s. I literally just did a little bit of everything. And that really did give me a lot of structure that I would even credit today that some of my, some of my success at Thrive, my current company, my real estate company, was the discipline I got from understanding how large companies work. And even to this day, when I'm presenting to larger institutions, I think that institutional experience is like, I get it. I get the politics. I get the mindset. I kind of know how to talk, who to talk to, who matters. I just actually had a pretty big win. Because, right now with banks right now, it's a tough time in real estate. So it's like, even how do you communicate?
You don't say.
Yeah. And
it's August of 24.
Yeah. And I just had a really tricky situation where I was very close to a very serious foreclosure on a large project, like a $50 million project. I knew that I had gone as far as I had gone with this group, and that the only way that I was going to save my ass on this one was going to be to get to somebody higher in this corporation. It's a bank. And it was a very big bank with a very large corporation headquartered. I mean, I didn't have a network, and I had to I joked and called it my amazing race moment, where I had to literally figure out how to get to towards the top and plead my case.
I love
and
that.
If I didn't, I would have lost this project. And it turned out I got through LinkedIn, through Amazing Race, through through a little bit of luck, we'll call it. I'll even give the divine a little credit, what do you call it? Joe Dispenza would call it source and fourth dimension, like living in the quantum, whatever it was. I was able to plead my case in a way that I got heard, that saved my project. So even to this day, it's like understanding corporate structure and talking to the right person when someone says no to you. Can you go higher, and how, even when it seems impossible? This one was impossible. I mean, it made no sense. It was so hard. If I told you the bank and how large they were, it was impossible, but we just did it.
I just had this conversation with my assistant last night, actually, and she was like, yeah, but I couldn't do it. This was no. And I was like, listen, if you're going to accept the no's from people, this is not going to work out.
Yeah.
The difference between the people that execute in life and those that don't are that they're willing to push. And it's just a question of how hard you're pushing and when it feels impossible and when it doesn't, right? And we know through going through a bunch of experiences that there's tons of stuff other people would accept that we won't.
Yeah.
Because once you've gone through it a bunch of times, you're like, oh, no, that's not how that actually works. Or it doesn't have to work that way.
Yeah.
And here's why. And then there are things where you're like, oh, shit. So I applaud you for that. It sounds like, you can't give me the details on that, but that's a big project to potentially have go sideways.
Another thing was really a really big project, and I wish I could tell you more of the details, but it worked out so well in the end. Like the cooperation I got, it went from get your lawyers ready, just get ready for a battle with us, and get ready to give us the keys, to total cooperation. And by the way, it's going to work out great for everyone. Just that it's already working out great. So it's just funny, literally getting there. But to credit, I think this is really important. It actually was not my idea. I was feeling pretty stuck. I have the courage after, as an entrepreneur, like you said, but it wasn't even my idea. It's like having friends like you and having other friends in the community. Like when I had a friend who literally were at dinner, he just looked up to me so innocently. He's like, I was actually in your situation once, and here's what I did. And he's like, why don't you try that? And at first, the minute he said it to me, I was almost like, oh, I can't do that. That's you don't understand. My story is different than yours. You did it, but this is much bigger of a bank. This is and he looked at me and I love that about this is where your friends and your community matters everything. He really was looking at me like, dude, stop. Stop with your smallness. You're you. Just go do it. And literally something went off in me. I gotta fight, because you know what? This is big. This is a lot of money I'm protecting. And my fight, rather than my flight instinct, just kicked in. I have no idea if this is going to work, but I need to give this my all.
That's wild. I love that. I echo that in so many different scenarios in my life. There have been so many situations where somebody has said something and I've been like, Oh, shit.
It hurts.
You're right.
Yeah, I know. Doesn't
You're
it
right.
hurt sometimes?
Oh,
You're like,
shit,
I don't
you're
want to
right.
get the courage to do that. It was amazing.
Well, and sometimes it's not just the courage. It's also sometimes you're stuck in your life. And having an outside perspective is what it takes to break you out of your brain immediately stopping you.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the time your brain just says, well, that's not an option. We operate from what we call the 1-3-1 inside the company. And that is that if you are going to come to me with a problem, you better come with 3 solutions and then give me what you suggest we do as the one solution that we go with.
I love that.
And one of the mechanisms that is at play there is if you have a problem and you immediately go to this is the solution, or you have a problem and you immediately go to this can't work, in both cases, even if you think you have the solution right away, you have to get outside of your box and say, are there other possible solutions that will give you a better outcome? It also prevents people from just dumping their shit on me and being like, here's my problem. Can you fix it for me? I should not be, I am not, and I should not be the smart person in the company that's fixing problems. Like I have people around that are smarter in many areas, that are more experienced in many areas. They should be providing the solutions and working through it.
As I get older through business, I really realize that a good leader is really a good coach, right? Mm-hmm. So like to your point, like that realization, especially from a founder, if one founder to another founder, it's like, I think I was really good at letting go. I wasn't always good at like providing, even I could provide the vision because I'm a visionary, but then how do you provide the infrastructure to back the vision? And I'm still, to be honest, I'm actually being coached right now on this as a work in progress. Part of my excitement, quite frankly, right now, in what I'm calling Thrive 2.0, which is being addressed, growing my company in the next real estate cycles. It's actually my own personal challenge of, can I be that leader? Can I be that coach that can do just exactly what you're saying, that really can take the vision, but then provide the infrastructure where everyone knows individually what they're doing and then collectively what they're rowing to and how it all connects together. And I think in the first cycle, which kind of started after Sony, kind of from flipping homes, we can go through it from flipping homes to just kind of growing this business to getting to about $2 billion in transactions, has just been a process basically of just learning how to do that. But I realized that in the first cycle, and again, look at Austin, Texas, how it grew, it was almost like you caught a wave. And I was just lucky enough, and I give like people like Mike Dillard and other people who believed in me early a lot of credit. They brought investors, they trusted me. And thank God I had enough skill to not screw it up. So I joke, it was like this big economic wave came, right? Which was this real estate wave that came. And I think a lot of people would just miss the wave, just like surfers miss a wave. Why'd you miss it? You didn't have the money, you didn't have the experience. Well, at that point I had left Sony. I had enough experience to not screw it up and actually surf. I might not have been the best surfer, but I had enough gumption, experience, hopefully integrity, all the good stuff, customer service, that I was able to build a business from it. All that momentum, and that there was enough intelligence in providing good deals that it all worked.
Yeah.
But I think in 2.0, the idea is, how do we refine that skill for me as a leader and then put in the right team, that people who are smarter than me, who can execute, incentivize them the right way, clearly tell them what it is, incentivize them the right way so that we can grow this thing even bigger. And that just sounds, because if I had to do the same thing and rinse and repeat, I think this would be really boring. And I would even consider just not doing it, quite frankly. It's just, that's not fun. As a creative person, to probably just like you, you always want to try a new challenge. And I think this is a hard challenge for me. It's like, because a lot of founders aren't great leaders, especially when it comes to organizations. I don't know that I am, by the way, either.
Yeah, no, I am.
Right?
I am very, look, I am very, very, very slowly learning this lesson and how to do this.
Yeah.
And I have historically not been good at it. But it is, it has become more and more clear to me, both how important it is if you want to actually have a better lever, and also how important it has ended up being from a purpose perspective, where uplifting the team and the people around me has actually become a core driver, as opposed to me just building and making money.
Yeah.
In the beginning, I had heard that, and I heard people say that, oh yeah, it's about the team. And I'm like, yeah. Okay.
Put the poster over there, right?
Right.
Teamwork.
Right. And going through this journey, like, there is actually a transformation of, my values have changed or aligned differently is probably a better way to look at it.
Yeah. I think we both have a friend, Jennifer Hootie Moscow. And so Jennifer actually recently was on my podcast a couple of weeks ago.
Awesome.
And she was saying that it's innate in all of us, for like humans, like when they go to work, to feel like they're connected to a mission. And if they don't, it's not like you can't get work out of them, but it's like almost like a human need to provide that. And if you want to get people really flourishing, when they feel like they're part of something bigger than just making the owner money, you get a different team and you get a whole different energy. And she says, she's done 3,000 of these vivid visions. And she just says that you can see company from company where that works and how that company blooms energetically, collectively, versus companies that just aren't set up for that.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the initial real estate transactions and how it led to Thrive FP right now, because I think it's very uncommon for people to start with this grand vision that pulls them through their whole life.
Yeah.
And the examples of the people that are there are astounding, right? You look at from the sports stars to the business stars. You look at the Michael Jordan that in high school figured it out theoretically. You look at Tiger Woods, who was pushed and figured it out at a very young age, or Serena Williams. Those are their entire life is driven by purpose.
Right.
Or Steve Jobs or Elon Musk, grand vision. But for most of us, I don't fucking know what the grand vision is.
Totally.
And so my default is just keep moving and figure it out as you go. And the more clear I can get the picture over time, the more momentum, the faster it goes, the happier I am because I'm driving towards something bigger. But it sounds like you didn't start with a vision.
No, I was definitely very far from the Tiger Woods and very much just fake it till you make it. And I think one of the things that was actually depressing to me when I got into real estate, because, and I should tell you, my father was a syndicator, and basically it's, we Thrive, we syndicate, meaning we have investors. We've got like 350 high net worth investors that put money alongside us, and we basically buy mostly multifamily apartments. We also do lending on real estate lending. And it just seemed really flat to me. It felt very, very one-dimensional at the time. Like, what have I done? How did I go from being a guy in the south of France and to a guy who's sitting in his childhood bedroom when he started? My dad was retired, so I was back in my childhood bedroom putting ads in the newspaper looking for small investors. That's really what started. And I literally was freaking out. Like, I was just like, what happened to me? I mean, and it took a while. I started with very small, like most real estate people. I started just small projects, including flipping houses. I started lending money, like doing bridge and hard money lending. My first one was a $77,000 house in Killeen. Boy, did I work my ass off. And right when I started launching, Bernie Madoff and had just stolen all that money. There was like this whole thing of people freaking out of like scams that were going on. So I couldn't have picked a worse time from the standpoint of, and it was also a downturn, kind of like now. So yet people are fearful, as we know, even as of August 2024, people are fearful during downturns. And then there was a lot of, because it literally money had just been stolen, there was a lot of investor fear. So number one for me was just like, how do I raise, even at the time, it was like, how can I raise $500,000? How can I raise $1 million? And it took a lot of creativity. And at the time, the cutting edge technology was just literally having Dropbox. And that seemed like such a small technology, but Dropbox and all those like first cloud, based things.
I remember. It was amazing to suddenly have
amazing.
files on all your computers and share them with people.
For the first time, I could tell potential investors, you don't have to believe in me. You don't have to trust me. Here are all the files. Here's the appraisal. Here's our underwriting. All you need to do, and by the way, if you want to, I don't even need to see the money. You can send the check directly to the title company. Like, I don't have to touch your money. All you're really buying from me, but you have to believe in me. Look at the Dropbox. Just look at all the files if you want to, and believe that I know how to underwrite real estate. That's what you're paying me for. To this day, by the way, if you think about it, if you invest with someone in real estate, why would you need a promoter or a syndicator if you can do it yourself? And I know you do some of your own real estate. And the answer is, you want someone like me to make you a really nice risk-adjusted return. You're paying me to do that. So you're ultimately betting on the jockey, right? That they can do that.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
well, hold on. Explain this part to me, because you mentioned doing, first of all, presumably you made a good chunk of money working for Sony. And it sounds like not as much.
But I spent it all on the legal fight with the real estate guy.
Damn. Okay.
All my savings I spent literally in a legal battle.
That's an
with
important.
This guy.
Yeah, that's an important note, because
that's why I was broke. When you asked me why was I broke at 33, because I spent all that money in a legal battle.
Brutal. Brutal. So, do you have any regrets about that? Do you wish you didn't battle that person?
No. They got me here. I wouldn't be with you in this seat. Why the heck did I go from a Hollywood executive in LA? You know why? And I'll tell you the answer. I should have had millions of dollars. I produced a successful film. All my Tony Robbins, I was working my ass off. I was doing all the things. I mean, the most disciplined guy on the planet with nothing to show for it.
Ouch.
Nothing to show for it. I was single, broke, and all my friends at that point, a lot of my friends had become doctors or professionals. So really, but I think to this day that like there's a part of me that I think is more grateful for what I have. I think I'm going to say I'm maybe a little more humble now. Because it was hard earned, and I was a little more mature. I wasn't the 25-year-old tech kid who made it. Like I had so many failures and so many things that I tried that I think there's just a different level of appreciation now for money. And I think that kind of segues a little bit to like the idea of how did I go from like a boring real estate company more to purpose. And I think all this pain and all these setbacks actually made me say, kind of what you were saying, like, there's got to be more to this than just making money. What else is this about? And how can I take some of the creativity from the days of Sony? And how can I take animation, or the things that I loved in a creative process, and how can I bring that to what seems to be a very boring business, commercial real estate finance? I joke and I say, I can say those words and almost put you to sleep. Commercial real estate finance.
Yes.
You ready to fall asleep? We'll do it one more time. Well, you and I we're both in the finance worlds, right? So like, it's not inherently interesting. And so a lot of my journey from like 33 on was, how can I infuse creativity and purpose and some progressiveness in an industry that's not traditionally any of those things.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of my journey that kind of made this whole thing a lot more interesting for me.
Can you think of a moment or a thing that started that path, that triggered that?
Yeah, absolutely. Austin, as it was really just in its infancy of growing, decided it was going to host its own TEDx event. And I really was not thinking that much. And I had just heard John Mackey, the CEO of Whole Foods, who's now become a friend, but at the time, I just heard him on stage, and John Mackey talking about conscious capitalism, that every stakeholder needs to win. I had just read Peter Diamandis' book about, abundance. Like there is an unlimited abundance. Like technology is bringing us to abundance and optimism. And then I went to this TED conference. It was just an Austin local TEDx conference. And there was a guy speaking about his 9 months he spent in the Himalayas surviving. I forget, he was on a survival thing. But for some reason, he used the word thrive. He's like, in spite of all my challenge, in spite of all my setbacks that I'd gone through, I learned how to thrive. And something hit me. It literally hit me. It was like the word thrive, which became the name of my company, Thrive FP. It all came down to me. I had to learn to take all those setbacks, and I had to learn how to thrive from them. And so I literally renamed my company. Was called at the time Principles Capital Funding. About as boring as you could be, right? Right?
Yes.
I mean, I'll say it 4 times and let's see if you're still awake.
We could pick. Yeah, you
couldn't pick a more generic, boring thing, right?
Exactly.
And then I went to Thrive FP, and the FP was a joke about an LLC. Like Thrive FP was a joke, or an LP, and it was standard for FP was for purpose for profit. So it was that first moment. I think it just was starting to take synthesizing John Mackey, Peter Diamandis, that TEDx conference of I want to stand for conscious capitalism, meaning that all my stakeholders need to win. And the fact that I have apartments and that most of my residents or my tenants are workforce housing residents, meaning they're earning between $25,000 and $75,000 a year. That is America's working class. I don't deal with homeless. I'm not in transition. I am dealing with 41 million Americans, the heartbeat of America, the ones who keep all of us, thriving. And that I think that was an aha moment of I have a responsibility here, not just to my investors, not just to a spreadsheet of earning a 16 or 20 IRR, but I actually had a responsibility to make sure that what I was doing in my world was going to be accretive to the residents and not extractive to the residents. It was that simple, consciousness of because I saw how a lot of these people lived, especially my early days in Louisiana were pretty rough properties. I've seen the heroin needles, I've seen gunshots, I've seen everything, bed bugs, I've seen, you name it. It can just go on and on and on. Because if you think about it, 20,000 apartments, the average person has 3.1 people per apartment. And if you've done 20,000 units, that's so far I've affected, call it 60,000 people just alone. That's not even my nonprofit. So all of a sudden, how many products, and by the way, it's not just 60,000 people. Going back to the world of our friends, some people are trying to get 30 seconds of your attention or 60 seconds. What's it cost? They live at my place. I have them 12, 14 hours a day. So how am I presenting to them? How's my lobbies? What are my cues that this is home and not a place where it's just a landlord's coming to pick up a check? Now, I am FP, which is also for profit. So I do have a responsibility also to my investors. So I'm not an angel. It still takes how do I, expenses, rent, like there's no way if you're a for-profit, that's just the way it is. But can you come into it with a different lens of consciousness of making sure that your residents feel like they're home? And by doing so, here's what you actually wind up creating. You wind up creating resident retention. Mm-hmm. So when residents stay longer, investors win.
Yeah.
So but literally, I know this seems like so basic, but you'd be surprised. This doesn't happen very often in my industry.
Yeah. I don't believe in altruism. I do not think that concept exists. I mean, I think that at the end of every chain of what people would deem to be an altruistic activity, at a minimum, is people doing something to make themselves feel good. And it is always a part of that exchange. That kind of leads me into that thought process. But I also believe that when you do something good like that, the other part of it is that, as you said, the other people win and it keeps the circle going.
Yes.
And I think that's true in a lot of areas of business where it's like doing the right thing is going to result in positive press, positive PR, happy customers, happy employees. And yeah, you could do a slightly different version, but you might piss off one person or two people in that exchange. And if the people in the exchange are your staff, your vendors, and your clients, you don't want to piss any of those people off if you can avoid it. So if you can make a little bit less money on a transaction and everybody's happy leaving it, that's the thing that actually lifts the whole thing the next time you go through it.
And then also this goes back to creativity. And I think I do credit my Sony days for this, is like there was other things I wanted to do for the residents, but I couldn't necessarily justify it in a for-profit wrapper. I wanted to create free programs. I thought how easy could it be? I mean, these are our residents. Why don't we just take really good care of them so they stay long? And it's really expensive to turn an apartment. So if you think about it, somebody moves out, and in Texas, to give you an example, over 50% of your residents move out in 1 year in what I'd call C and B class apartments. So imagine having these, and you think about it. So you have downtime, you have to repaint it, you have to recarpet it, you pay a leasing commission, you got to get your staff. It's anywhere. This process usually costs you in a good market between $5,000 and $15,000 of emptiness. So if I can literally put a hit on that and get better at that, why wouldn't you do that? So my idea was why don't we create some free programs for the residents? Not just amenities are usually in my industry. The amenities are like sparkling pool, laundry. It's kind of bullshit, to be honest. I mean, yeah, you have a sparkling pool, everyone does. But what if you had free telemedicine? What if you just gave them teledoc? What if you gave them tutoring for their kids in any language digitally? They can just access free tutoring because you were providing that for them. But I realized it would be harder to justify some of those expenses. We did some environmental things as well. So I created a nonprofit. And so the nonprofit now provides free programs for workforce housing residents for, right now, I think we're in about 8,000 apartment units. So we're affecting about 21,000 people. And I'm planning to grow that nationwide. I actually want to change our industry that programs come with rent. In a for-profit model.
I love that.
But in the meanwhile, but this goes back to that journey of literally creating. And what I found is that step one of creating is intention. I had to wake up. I was fast asleep. I was walking these buildings, doing the spreadsheet, just like everyone else. I wasn't thinking necessarily about I was thinking about surviving, putting diapers on my kid, keeping my wife happy. I mean, and that's fair. That's survival, man. I was broke. I had to literally crawl myself out, and my wife kept shopping at Whole Foods, and I'm like, you got to ease up on Whole Foods, right? In the early days, all that stuff. So it's hard when you're in scarcity to really think that way. But what I learned through my journey is that when you get out of scarcity, it's and bringing creativity to everything that you do it's amazing what you can create. From the story I told you about, this bank thing that recently happened. We become magicians, but it starts one tool at a time. What happened for me was I said, let's experiment. Step one, way before the nonprofit was, let's put up a garden so they can in one building where I knew some people had little plants. I could see there was a lot of planting. I'm like, why don't we try? We have all this extra lawn, or this lawn's doing nothing for us. Why don't we provide a garden? And what I learned from the garden was that it kind of worked. People loved it, but without organization, the kids would throw the tomatoes at the wall. So we had tomatoes all over the walls. So, but again, that was step one. Mm-hmm. And then it led to this things of it just keeps leading on and on and on. And right now we have some of the largest institutional partners who have partnered with us on the nonprofit
I love that.
to implement the programs.
So what did it take for you personally to get to the place where that transition happened?
Depression.
Oh, interesting.
I went through a massive depression. I was in a hole. And it was the craziest hole because my company was growing, I was making money. And there was a lot of stuff going on at home. I actually had, my mother-in-law was dying in my house of cancer, and I had 2 young kids. And I don't know, I think I was just going through, I was starting to make some money. I remember I bought my first fancy car, but everything was uncomfortable for me. And I think the depression was things that were going on at home. Again, watching someone die in your house is pretty heavy. I wasn't prepared for it. I just didn't have any preparation for that. But then I also think making money, it felt like a really shallow victory. Like I didn't know what to do with it. Some days I'd come into my office, I'd shut my door and I'd cry. And I didn't know what I was crying about. I was just crying. I just was in so much, I couldn't find the joy in anything for about a year or 2.
But you had money at that point.
Here's the funny thing, the money kept rolling in. Like our success, like I'm sitting here like, really going through a rough psychological time. And in the meanwhile, I'm on podcast, I'm like doing I was highly functional, but completely in a psychological hole.
Do you think that you could have gotten to the point of transition had you not become financially successful?
To be honest, probably not. I think the money was helpful. But what I was really craving, so I think it was a combination, quite frankly, of having money come in. And then I think being in that hole, I had to figure out how to get out of the hole. The hole lasted for a while. Again, I think a lot of what I told you, but I think like something in the Diamantis book, something about hearing John Mackey speak, because I think what it was it's like I had to find a purpose. I had to find something.
Yeah.
And it was actually the purpose that I believe took me out of the depression. Having a purpose that I wasn't even achieving yet, but having like a notion of going towards something artistic, creative, meaningful, spiritually fulfilling, I think was what got me out of my hole.
Yeah. I think for me, and I think this is probably true of other people, but for me, money was the purpose until I had it. And then there was a hole for other purpose. But the concern that somebody in my life likes to say, die eating cat food. I never had a concern I would die eating cat food, but I did have a concern that I'd like be on a hamster wheel forever. So I think that initial thought of, hey, how do I get to, functional retirement, not having to worry about money, was the first step. Yeah. And because it was this overwhelming feeling of I have to do it, and it was wrapped up in scarcity, it was wrapped up in the need for accomplishment and proving myself and ego and all these things, that drove me. And it also took the space that was required for me to focus on something bigger.
Yeah.
And for you, that was purpose.
Yeah.
And when you say purpose, you mentioned conscious capitalism and John Mackey. Is that the purpose? Can you define the purpose further?
Yeah, I think for me, again, I never dreamt of, because I wasn't Tiger Woods, that I'd wind up being in a business that basically provides housing for workforce housing residents or lending money on, like that wasn't like certainly the dream at 4 years old. But I think the purpose was, now that I'm here, you start to realize the plight of, you go through evictions, you hear all the stories, and you're just like, well, for some reason I'm here. What can I do to effectuate workforce housing in America? Like we spend so much time talking about homeless people or the homeless, but that's actually numerically the workforce. The people who are $500 away from an emergency they can't afford is it's a lot of America, not everyone, but it's a lot of them. It's a lot bigger than homeless or other problems that we have. It's like people just getting by, the Uber driver who's got a second job, who if the car breaks or the transmission goes out, and I have a lot of family members in that situation right now. This isn't like a theory, like I live this. I don't think most of us live this. We see it in our friends, we see it in our families, ones who are just getting by, and again, one problem away. And I think that for some reason, I just decided creatively, like how can I impact this in a way where, again, I'm a creative capitalist. So like to your point, like how do I do this in a for-profit wrapper and use the money for good and hopefully to wake up my industry that these people are not pieces of traffic. They're not commodities. My product is not a phone. It's not a hairpin. It's workforce housing residents. It's people. It's residents providing housing for residents. And I think that it's hard. It's easy to commoditize everything. Everything becomes a spreadsheet. Like, hey, how many pieces of traffic came in our door this week? That's a very common thing to say. But like, I think humanizing it, and then for me, this is going to sound strange, but I'll tell you what I actually think it comes to. It became, as I grew spiritually, like we talk about this idea in Christianity, and I'm not Christian, but it's still an interesting idea.
Love it.
Love thy neighbor as thyself. We talk about, strangers, and I'm thinking, gosh, it's so easy, especially in Austin, Texas, hey, bro, how you doing? You give your friends a big hug and you go to your next cool Burning Man experience together and you go here and you meet at this fancy restaurant, you're having craft cocktails. But like, what about this idea? If we really are loving, and if we really say we stand for love, which a lot of us in our community like seem to be very loving individuals, well, then it seems like to me it could be a real challenge. Like, I don't know that much about loving a stranger. Even loving a neighbor is easier, especially in my neighborhood. But like, what about loving a stranger that you have very little in common with? Like, what does that even mean? Really? Like, let's cut the bullshit. Like, what does that mean? Could you feel and not think it, not to your point, not try to be altruistic, but could you really see someone soul to soul for who they are and know that you're there for them, that you're not just providing a service for your investors, but like you are fucking there for them? Really? And that's still my ongoing spiritual challenge of this business now. So it's taken on another purpose for me personally, which is love a stranger as thyself. Like, can I really get to that point? So one of the motivations for the nonprofit, one of the motivations to continue doing this is actually the spiritual journey for me of getting to the point. And I actually have a vision in my mind of what that looks like. But it's a feeling. It's a feeling, and it's a feeling and an emotion, and it's curiosity. But I know it's also a spiritual pursuit.
Wow. I tend to feel love for people that I don't know when they're in peril. And I think that seems to be, there seems to be something very human about that, where people help strangers when it's clear that they're hurting. But there seems to be an utter absence of it if they're not.
Exactly.
Everywhere.
I call it the illusion of separation. Pick a team.
Yeah.
Just, we're all on a team. We're the red, blue. Are you red? Are you blue? Are you this? Are you that? But like, it creates so much separation versus actually seeing each other.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Where does that leave you now with the company? What's the current sort of frame of the company? What does it look like? Give me metrics around it: volume, headcount, where you're going.
Yeah. So right now, by the way, I went from 20,000 units. I've sold. I'll give myself a little credit. I sold 18,500 of those units.
Damn. You
in
told
the
me
last
that,
5 years.
Damn. Yeah. You told me that you were selling a couple big things.
I continue. I've sold them down to 1,500 units, which is pretty low for me. It's a badge of honor right now. That we started early. We were accused of being too conservative, being paranoid, and we made our investors great returns. We beat our business plans on a lot of them. I'm proud of that. But in a way, it's kind of an interesting moment because for 2 years, I have not purchased a single piece of real estate. So it's like literally like things have been off. I'm still, we're managing a large fund. I'm managing my 1,500 units, but I'm at 14 employees right now, keeping everyone there. I'm actually hiring right now to get ready for the next cycle. I'm ready to raise money in the next cycle, but there's no evidence that I should be doing this right now. My company's revenues are down right now. When you're down to 1,500 units, sure, your revenues are down.
Yeah.
And
from
so
20,000.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, it's like that instinct. It's like kind of going back to like the time of like, I'm a little insecure right now in a good way because I just haven't raised money. It's like going on a date after not being on a date for a bunch of times. Like, going to go out there, putting kind of a team together. Also, as I told you, like doing this differently, not just doing the same thing. So like putting the processes, even how I raise money is going to be very different in this model. It's going to be a lot more fun for me, a lot more purpose driven. The idea for me at this point is to be more like I joke and say chief spiritual officer, really purpose, really talking about 4-dimensional wealth. Like, what is wealth? Like, I can help anyone. I can nerd out. If you want to show me your personal financial statement, you want to talk about cash flow or what to do with your money, I love doing that because I've done it so many times. I've helped people who have been kind of screwed or had a bad financial situation. And just, again, I'm not a financial planner. I just happen to be pretty good at figuring, because I just invest in so many things myself.
Sure, and you're a finance guy.
And I'm a finance guy. So
finance guys are moving quick and looking at numbers.
I love that shit. To me, it's like painting a canvas. It's just super fun for me at this point. But the idea at this point of it doesn't matter. But I think since I'm a numbers guy, like I could see, maybe doing 25,000 more units. I could see managing, $500 to $700 million, which is a really important number to me because I don't want to become institutional. I love my time and my freedom. So I kind of also know at this point in my partner as well. We know how far we want to take this, and we also know where we want to stop. I think sometimes like as men or just in general, it's easy just to keep growing and growing and growing.
Yeah.
But the vision is to keep it where it's still like a boutique. I call it boutique private equity at that point. We keep our mission. I think that we attract a certain crowd of unique individuals where we've always outperformed the market. So we'll outperform the market, but I really want investors that really are attracted to that they're part of something, and while their money's going there, it's also going to a company that's taking care of its residents and doing these programs and being more innovative. That's interesting to me. So like if I get it my way in the next cycle, it's pretty easy. I'm more doing this like what I'm doing here with you. Hopefully mentorship has become a bigger part of my life. We're kind of mentoring the next generation. And I find with so many people, they're so stuck in their how, or they're so stuck in their head. This is like the most common thing I find. It's like, I'll ask them, so what's your goal? My goal is to be worth $5 million. My goal is to be worth, it's always a money. It's a dollar amount. And the next question I'll be like, what buys you? Like, what does $5 million buy you? And then they go into the story. It's a narrative that they've been telling for so long in their head, but the narrative is so not connected to anything emotionally or spiritually of what they want. There's actually, for most people, there's such a big disconnect. They've got a number, but they really don't have that why deep enough. They think they have the why deep enough, but it doesn't lead to purpose. And so I've been doing, between my podcast and mentoring people, that's something that really turns me on. I would love to use commercial real estate as my excuse to have conversations like I'm having with you now, of how can we be these great capitalists, but put a lot of purpose and prove to people that capitalism is a force for good and that doing good and doing well absolutely works together. I mean, I am as competitive as can be. I just don't have to hurt someone. No one has to lose for me to be competitive. Nobody has to lose on the other side of that. I can be competitive for my investors, for the workforce housing residents, for myself by thinking more creatively, by structuring deals differently, but making sure that the other side doesn't lose, I think is really important. I heard, one more thing, I hope I'm not going too far off. I heard this interesting thing that, from a perspective of when you die, this was a rabbi saying, the first question you're going to be asked, if you believe that you're asked anything, but if you believe there's pearly gates, the first question that you would be asked is what?
Was it a life well lived? What was your purpose?
You'd think so. Behind? But you know what? What the rabbi told me, and I thought this was a really interesting thing. How were you in business? Did you treat people well? Were you fair, and did you treat people well? Because the rabbi's point,
a pastor wouldn't have said that shit.
Right. This is a Jewish perspective. I think the commentary was how you act in your business is how you act in your life.
Yeah, 100%.
I think that was the point of it. Is like how you treat people there. There's no difference. And I think a lot of people treat business as a sport. Like it's okay to screw someone because my job is to maximize efficiency or maximize return at any expense. Yeah. And I don't believe that to be the case. So I think what it looks like in the next phase is I get to hang out with you more. We get to do cool shit together, have a company that thrives. And the most important thing I always say to people is like, you and I both cannot guarantee, like I can't guarantee macroeconomics. I've had some losses in this cycle. It's my first time. It's like after a perfect average, now we've had some losses. So now it's getting real because I can't affect macroeconomics. When prices go down 20 to 40%, I mean, that's nothing I can do with the Fed and $9 trillion of money that went in. So all we can control as business guys is how we treat people, transparency, fiduciary, being the A-team, and doing the best we can so when shit starts to go wrong, that we know we're doing the best we can on behalf of our investors. And that's all I can offer. But that's my side of the equation. And I just think that's really important going forward and not trying to overpromise people. In fact, one of the things I've learned during the downturn is, and I really credit my partner for this, who talks to the investors, are my clients more than, we usually deliver bad news early and often. We do not wait. We don't powder puff. We give a lot of communication if you're listening, and we don't overscare them. There's no reason to, but we just say it like it is. And I think that really, if I could give advice to anyone out there, so much better than when you're like a little afraid, that's the time. Just say it. Just get it. If you think it's relevant, like clear it out, but just people much prefer, because then you create this relationship of trust with people, and people can take, it's surprising how well people can take bad news if it's given to them with respect and trust and early, where they don't feel surprised from it. That's been my experience of the downturn.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that it's also back to, the farce of altruism. I also think that it's self-serving. I think that when you have the difficult conversations routinely, you feel better.
Yeah.
You are letting go of stress. You are not ruminating, and you are moving through things. And when you're holding on to that shit, you don't have the space to solve another problem.
Yeah.
It's occupying something there.
Yeah.
So we're going into Q4 of 2024.
Yeah.
What does real estate look like in the multifamily?
So right now, it's really coming from Austin, Texas. There's oversupply. We have these cycles. So everyone 4 and 5 years ago, when they thought the go-go days couldn't end, they built too many units. So in Dallas, in Austin, almost everywhere, in some of the key markets, particularly southern markets, were overbuilt. So for the first time, we're actually seeing rents going down right now. Rents went up crazy, but when you have this much supply in the marketplace, the market's soft right now. My rents have gone down about 15% this year. Not great, not great. A lot of the multifamily looks like a business right now, where your expenses have gone way up between interest rates, insurance, taxes. So your expenses are way up and your revenue ironically is down. So it's like you couldn't, it's a shitty time in a lot of ways.
Yep.
And if anyone who's purchased anything in the last 3 or 4 years, like most likely, not always, but I'd say most likely, they're in a business that's really having some net profit challenges based on what I said. So what has to happen? Prices have to go down so that you can create, most people want to create cash flow from their businesses or profits, not losses. So my prediction is that we are in a hard time right now. Prices have gone down. I think prices have gone down more than people realize. I think residential, I think even in Austin, I think prices are down 20% right now. I can tell you multifamily in Texas is down between 20 and 45% right now. The reason why you don't hear too much about this yet is because not a lot's transacted. Because
hold on, you need to benchmark this, because 20 to 40% since when?
I'd say in the last 24 months.
Well, right. So, but that's really, really important, because you look at how much it grew in Austin,
right,
in 2020 and 2021.
Right.
We just went up too much, but
right,
we're still way the fuck above where we were in 2019.
Well, I can tell you though, prices are just starting to, which is why I'm raising money right now again. Prices are just hitting prices actually in Austin of almost 5 years ago, or maybe even 8 years ago. Like prices have gone down. That's what I'm saying. If you think about that, 40 or 45% is most of that fat.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's fat, it's just a cycle, but we're actually getting prices that I haven't seen in years.
Well, it's a bigger conversation, because it's also zip code specific. So if you look at the center of downtown versus the different areas, and you look at the shifts in all those, they're nuances, right?
Yeah.
And you look at multifamily versus single family home, and you look at even inside of single family home, kind of what product you're looking at, what type of house.
Correct.
All that matters.
It does.
And I guess I want to put an exclamation point on that, because there's so much spun news on the condition of real estate in any given market. And you need to double click on it. Like you need to say, hey, what are you actually trying to do? What's the point? And, the question of like, what's the real estate market like now?
Yeah.
It's like, well, fuck, man. What are you trying to do? What's the point?
Totally. And I think that, again, if you look at your customers, if it's like any business, supply and demand, housing still, we have a huge shortage of housing. And that's going to be long-term, and that's going to be like, and you look at the companies that are growing in especially growth cities like here and other places, like the business is really good. Right now, the fundamentals are off. It's overpriced, in my opinion. Yet now you're seeing institutions jumping back in. And here's what the institutions are saying. When they look at crypto, when they look at the stock market, when they look at other equities, they still want to be in real estate. The thing that's troubling for me right now is that a lot of these institutions are already beginning to go off the lines, and they're starting to invest again. But they're investing at prices still where you're not producing cash flow. Like
Right.
you're doing it. They call it a basis play. So they're buying
Right.
because they're buying below the cost to build it, which is called replacement cost. They feel like, again, and I think if you're a teacher's pension fund or a police pensions fund and you're thinking 10 years out, that's maybe not a bad theory, because you just say, you know what, I see the supply demand imbalance. I don't even need to earn cash flow. Now, this is something new. Usually in the past, if you're investing in oil or stocks or real estate, you want to see some dividend. It may turn out in this next cycle that there's no dividend or very little dividend. Where in the past, for example, like I'd say in my career, the average dividend was 6 to 8% to the investor paid quarterly,
Right.
off of kind of B-class properties.
Yeah.
That dividend may be gone or lowered because you're going to have a lot of competition. Now that you've gotten, I mean, it used to be a mom and pop
Gross.
industry particularly,
Right.
and now it's become BlackRock and the big ones, and there's so much money
Yeah.
that I think that unfortunately you're going to see either no or lower yields. If you want to invest in real estate, you're going to look at it as a long-term basis play. And the reason why you're going to do it, you're going to say like, I've got crypto here, I've got stocks here, but I want to be in hard assets that are, inflation resistant, go with markets and what have you.
I look at that sort of similarly to big tech and venture capital.
Yeah.
Right. Venture capital will sink money in, look, doing a series A, B, C, D, E is pretty fucking close to a Ponzi scheme a lot of the time.
Yeah. No, I gotcha.
And so it's like the business isn't making money.
No.
There's no profit, and let's just keep dumping money into it. Let's
But
raise
your
more.
A or B may get diluted, so whatever good deal you think you got could just be wiped
Crazy.
out. Yeah.
But the bet is, and I'd say that there's more volatility and way more risk. The bet is eventually we can see over a long enough time horizon, the macro picture works. And the same concept is what you're saying with real estate, where it's like, hey, look, we're not concerned about the loss of cash flow in the next 8 to 10 years. We know that the numbers will work 10 to 15 and it'll be stable.
Yeah. I'm bullish. I actually think it's not 8 to 10. I think it's actually, I think I'm optimistic that in the next 3 to 5 years, we're just going to continue going down the road. And I think we're going to be just fine. I think the product will get absorbed. Things will get a little more in balance. We do have an affordability issue, and there are lots of potential solutions for that even too. A lot of it, quite frankly, is we have to allow zoning. I know a lot of people don't want their neighborhoods to become more dense, but part of it is density, part of it's transportation. I don't know if you and I will be flying in drones in the next 5 years from place to place.
Hope so.
But I hope so too. I actually think it's possible in the next 5 to 10 years we will start to get off the ground a little bit, and I think that's a game changer, because I think density solves your problem. Right? Density creates opportunity for people to, more people to live. Austin's already done a very kind of a big deal where they're allowing more density even in this beautiful neighborhood you're in. Yeah, the three things. These are all the things that are really going to help create really nice housing and affordable housing for people. And there's no reason why you can't make a profit and still provide great affordable housing. So that's my thing.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you a couple quick questions before we wrap here. So you've used the language, you don't want to end up institutional.
Yeah.
But you're playing a big game and you're raising money for investors to invest in real estate. I like to do shit myself because I'm afraid of losing control of things.
Yeah.
And it's not lost on me that that's not my whole game, right? At some point you are investing in other people's projects, or it behooves you to. It's a lever. For a 25-year-old starting in real estate, what do you suggest they do?
Yeah, I think it actually is a personality, because there's people I call like the lone wolves, and you can make a lot of money just doing your own things. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of friends who've made a lot of money doing that. I brought in a business partner. I have other partners. I like team. I like complementary things. So theoretically, I have to do more business to get to the same pie, right? Because I've got a team and staff and partners. But I love the way I've done this. Like, my partner is amazing. We've been together for almost 15 years now, and we conquer and divide, and we do it so well together. But it's like a relationship. It really is. It's a lot of management. If you're not that kind of person who likes to manage other people, hard to find just like it's hard to find the right partner in life, it's hard to find the right partner to partner with, where they don't break your heart either or steal your money, which happens a lot of times in business. So I think it really is a person, and managing people is a lot of work. I think it's a lot of work to manage people. Like, you gotta want to do this. it just fits my personality. So I don't think there's any right way. I think you kind of know who you are. If there is a big responsibility. I'd say it's a bigger responsibility managing other people's money than your own. What keeps me up at night is not necessarily about me. It's about, thinking about my investors. And, when that bank story I told you earlier, it's like, that's not my money. That's, it is my money too, actually. My money's in every deal, but it's my money, but it's a lot of investor money. So like, it is a pressure that some people don't want to take on. It takes a lot of communication, a lot of work. So I would say know who you are, know thyself when picking which direction you want to go.
What do you think the biggest mistake is that you've made along your path?
Sometimes out of fear of not wanting to be the guy who eats cat food, I've been too conservative. I think sometimes fear has gotten in the way of my judgment of where I could do more. I don't totally I could swing bigger in a lot of things, not just in real estate. I think even in like giving away philanthropy, I think there's more there that sometimes I hold back. I think I hear a lot of people and their tragic stories, and I'm like, I don't want to be that statistic. And because of that, maybe I hold back more than I need to. And I think it's maybe held back might be a word. Maybe there's some relationships I missed out on, some great friends that maybe I just kind of like wasn't sure, didn't put in the time. I'm sure there's always deals. I'm sure my company could have even it's been very successful, obviously, but it could have probably been twice as successful if I wanted it to be. And I'm not sure that really matters, but I'd like to think as I grow that I'm doing things more from intuition and wisdom and less from fear. And that's taken me a long time. I mean, I think that's a lifelong process, but I think in my 30s and my 40s, there was a lot of fear in the mix when I was making decisions.
Is intuition wisdom?
I think so. I think if you're really in it, if you're not in your ego, I think if you're hitting the sweet spot in meditation, you're not just closing your eyes and you're actually finding whatever your version of meditation is. If you're finding some quietness, I think it's our God-given right to have that ability. And I think that this idea that so much of frequency, vibration, intuition, whatever you want to call it, whatever lies beyond visible light, like that other 99%, that's all we know. It's real, just like your heart beats from electricity. Like we know all these things, and I definitely think you can tap into that. But it takes some discipline to do it.
What do you think the biggest disruption in real estate is going to be in the next 5 to 10 years, from a technical perspective or otherwise?
I think it's going to continue to be institutionalized. So the person you're renting your house from is going to be BlackRock, and I think they're not going to care as much. I think it's just going to be almost all completely automated.
Bleak.
Unfortunately, I think that there's just so much money. Money's become so concentrated at the top. Real estate, it's obvious that it's one of the most attractive places to go. So I do think this whole thing gets more institutionalized. You don't hand your check to your manager. I think it's just not going to be that kind of relationship. Mm-hmm. For what that's worth, I think that I think office is going to be really interesting to watch how we work. I struggle at my company. I think a lot of people are struggling as owners to what does this look like post-COVID? So what happens to those gorgeous office buildings? Do they become part-time? Do you work twice a week, 3 times a week? I think everyone's trying to figure it out. I've heard many, many things. So how we office and how we communicate is going to be changing, especially with AI. I don't think we're going to become nothing to do and we're all going to be on universal basic income. I don't see that happening. But what do we do and how do we communicate? But I think being communal, I don't think it ends. I don't think we all just work from home. I don't think that's good for our mental health. And I don't think having any job, I don't see that, just knowing how human beings are made. I think the only thing, maybe this is more of a dream that I'd like to see out of real estate from the physical envelope itself, is we've really created homogenized, non-walkable cities. Everything is about the car. And so when it's expensive, and then you build 20 miles out. When that gets filled, you build 25 miles out. When that gets filled, you build 30 miles out. And having regional hubs, if that's what we have to do, is take our farmland and convert it to keep affordability. I don't know if that's going to change. It's a hard pattern to change versus density. But this idea of having regional hubs, the Domain is a regional hub now, having walkable, not just drivable, not going to Best Buy and not going to, not going to your restaurant. Mm-hmm. But my hope would be we can get more creative in creating regional hubs that feel like town centers that are walkable. And if you look at what is successful in real estate, the most successful projects right now, almost people want to be together. They want to sit outside. They do want to commune. And I think that I don't think you would have ever imagined. I don't know how many units are at the, like, again, I use the domain here, which is just a local retail, but thousands of people live at that place. Why would you live in a retail center? Because people want to be close to each other. The one more piece I'd like to see with it is some green. There's no reason, as the planet's getting hotter right now, and concrete's quite frankly ugly. There's no reason why we can't get. I noticed this in Amsterdam. It's so easy on our buildings to start creating like literally like vertical landscaping, like gorgeous vertical landscaping for CO2, for pollution, to cool things down, and for beauty. I'm seeing it. I've seen some of this in Costa Rica. I've seen some of this in Amsterdam. I don't see enough of it here. And I'd love to see that in real estate going forward.
I love that. Awesome. JP, if people want to find out more about you, where do you want to point them?
Yeah. So for my company, it is thrivefp.com, FP like for purpose, for profit. My podcast is called Investing on Purpose, and you can find me at Investing on Purpose on all the main channels. The show talks a lot about how, very much what we talked about today, is how purpose-driven businesses can create outsized returns. And I interview some of the most interesting folks. In fact, I'm going to try to recruit you next to be on my podcast. And that's probably the best way to find me from those channels.
That's awesome. Well, next time will either be your podcast, but it will probably before that be just doing some fun shit somewhere.
I love it. I need to get you on the boat. We got to get some surfing done.
Hell yeah. Let's do it. All right, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.